Monster City Madhouse, a year-round online store full of Halloween and classic horror shirts, with an emphasis on the vintage look. Use code SAVE10 for 10% off your order. MonsterCityMadhouse.com. Free shipping and financing's available. Welcome back to Southern Ghost Stories. I am the American Haunted Historian, Alan Searcy. I'm glad you guys are with me. I got a fun show today, something I've been looking forward to doing for a while. I did one a few months ago, but I'm going to do a Q&A today. I've been telling you guys, follow Southern Ghost Stories on Facebook and Instagram. You guys can get with me on there. You can send me questions, and it's always fun. I mentioned on the last show, I've done some ghost hunting over the years. I don't do as much as I used to, but I've been in some crazy places, and I've seen a lot of weird, wild stuff. I've actually lived in a haunted house. So I plan on doing a Q&A this week, kind of talking about things I've seen and done, and just answering questions about the books. So if you guys are ready, why not just jump right in? So Michael Hall sent me a question. He's a good friend of the show. What got me started in the paranormal? Oh, man. And this is, I could talk all day about this. So when I was a kid, growing up in Middle Tennessee, it was kind of like a thing. You know, the Civil War was here. There's always ghost stories. You can hear things. My granny, I'd go to the grocery store with her, and there was a weekly world news, and they have like stories about ghosts and aliens and Bigfoot, and I would read those, got really tickled at some of the crazy wild stories. So I guess the earliest ghost story I can remember, I mean, as a kid, I would hear things about the Bell Witch, which is in Adams, maybe 30 miles from where I grew up. That was like the big thing. I mean, the Bell Witch is in Adams, Tennessee, but it's still like, I guess Nashville claims it as like their own. But yeah, the Bell Witch is always a thing. You'd hear, if you go into a bathroom at night and you have a candle, and you put the candle on the counter and you turn around 3 times, you say, "I don't believe in the Bell Witch," 3 times, she'd appear in the mirror. I was a chicken, I never did it, but that was kind of like always a thing I hear as a kid. But I guess my first recollection of anything like a ghost story. So my aunt and uncle bought a house in Hermitage, right outside Mount Juliet, which is, I guess, a little bit northeast of Nashville. So they bought this real nice house, and once they got settled, my aunt, she would, in the morning before she went to work, she would sit there in the mirror, and she would see like this apparition of like a Native American woman kind of just floating behind her. And it kept happening. I remember my cousin, he had a pinball machine downstairs in the basement. They had this really cool bar set up, man cave, whatever. And he would tell me like the machine would come on in the middle of the night. Like they would turn it off, but they'd be asleep at 2 a.m, and the machine would start talking. It was like, I think the pinball machine is called the Black Knight. It was like this medieval Black Knight on a horse, and you're trying to beat him at the pinball. But it would hear the Black Knight talking in the middle of the night. I guess that'd really freak you out. So things kept happening. Things get moved around. My aunt kept seeing the Native American woman. So they went to a priest or a pastor, and they got them to come and bless the house. And I think that did the trick. The stuff just kind of went away. The woman was not seen anymore. Well, they had a dinner party, I guess a year or 2 later. And as they're hosting this big event, someone walked over to my uncle and said, "You know, I think your property may be along the Trail of Tears." And my aunt and uncle just kind of perked up. What? And then they told him the story about the woman they had seen. So it just kind of really wild that that historian kind of put 2 and 2 together. He told them something they didn't know about their property, and it really jived with what had been going on with the Native American woman. So I remember hearing about that as a kid, and I thought that was just kind of weird and wild. But I never really lived in a haunted house until, I guess it's 2006. My great-grandparents, they bought this piece of property in the 1950s over in South Nashville. Well, the area in the 1300s, it was a Mississippian Indian village. And in the 1800s, a guy named John Overton, he was a Tennessee Superior Court Justice. He was a very prominent guy. He founded the city of Memphis. He bought this land that had been Native American land, and he built this big home. And he called his home Golgotha. And the reason he called it Golgotha, which translates to House of the Skull, he dug up 3 stone box graves on the plot where his house was sitting. He dug up the graves to build his mansion. So I guess just, it's some bad stuff going on from the start. And it was also a slave plantation. He was a slaveholder. A lot of the wealthy folks here in Middle Tennessee were at that time. So you have the Native American village, you have slavery, you have disturbing Native American graves. So that's like 3 strikes right there. Well, anyway, so 2006, in 98, my great-grandfather passed away, and my great-grandmother lived there until 2006. And finally, she got to be in her 90s, and my family put her in a nursing home. Well, my uncle called me and said, hey, the insurance won't cover the house. If it sits empty, would you please come move in? I was living in an apartment at the time, so hey, what have I got to lose? So I went to move in with this nice house. And the first night I was there was a trash can by the back door that moved 8 feet into the kitchen. I woke up and saw that and thinking, that's just really strange. So I was in a hurry to get to work. I didn't think much about it then. Well, I had a light in the den, and each night I would turn it off. It was one of those touch lamps. It was over in the corner. So I would, every night before bed, I would turn the lamp off. In the morning when I woke up, that lamp would be on. So, I mean, it kept happening. I turned it off, it'd be on. It wasn't every night, but it was quite often. So one morning I woke up and it was on. I just unplugged it and put it in the garage. I just got tired of fooling with it. My daughter told me she felt like somebody was watching her in her room on a few occasions. I had a buddy of mine come over, and he claimed he saw a lady standing in the corner of my bedroom. I never saw that, but that's what they told me. So weird things happen all the time. Behind the house, it's called Traveler's Rest now. Judge John Overton got married, and I guess his wife decided to call golf the House of the Skull. It's not a place to raise children, so they called it Traveler's Rest, which is a little more friendly. He taught up-and-coming lawyers there how to practice law. So the mansion, when I first moved in, I would hear the alarm go off, like the burglar alarm would go off maybe once or twice a week. It was really aggravating, but I kind of got used to it because the train tracks run behind the house. So I would hear the train. Eventually, I kind of just learned to tune out the burglar alarm as well. But it was so persistent. It was just kind of a pain when I first moved in. So things kept happening in the house. So one day, I hopped the fence and I walked over to the mansion. And it's like a museum. You can go in and they'll give you a tour. And I was talking to a elderly woman who worked there. I said, look, I live right across the fence over here. And weird things are happening in the house. This place haunted. Oh, honey, I can assure you, there's no such thing as ghosts. Here at Traveler's Rest, we talk about the Native Americans, talk about the Overton family. But ghosts is just it's not a thing. Okay, so I go to leave. And as I'm walking out, I see a lady dressed in period attire. I walk over and say, ma'am, I live over here behind the fence. And strange things are going on in the house. My daughter told me she's scared. Are there any ghost stories here? And she kind of just smirked, like, honey, there's so many things that happen here, but I'm not allowed to talk about it. So a lot of historic sites they don't talk about things. I think it's bad for business, maybe disrespectful to the dead. I don't really know. I know, like in Franklin, Tennessee, like the group that owns the Carter House, they forbid their people from talking about those kinds of things. So it's one of those things where, yeah, it's hands off. So, like, I knew something was going on, and I never was really alarmed. My great-grandmother eventually passed away. I think it's maybe 2010 or so. And after she passed away, like, when I moved in, we moved all her belongings into the front room, and I just kind of left that room alone. That's where her things were. I used the rest of the house. After she finally died, my aunt and my cousin came over, and they went through that room and got what they wanted. They moved things around. I think they sold some stuff or donated some things. They got things they wanted for their families. And when they left, my aunt and my cousin went out through the sunroom, which is an old converted garage. I heard the door close. And when I heard the door close, I heard a crash in the room they were just in where all the belongings were. So I rush in there, and I don't see anything. Well, walk around the corner, I noticed the mirror, but the fireplace is gone. I didn't know if maybe they had taken it home with them or what. Well, anyway, so I walk around the corner again to like the other door, and that mirror is laying against the door. So whatever was there, that mirror, it did not drop and fall off the mantle. It didn't drop and roll to the left or right off the mantle. Something snatched off the wall and threw it 8 feet down the hallway or to the walkway to where that door was. So that was the only time I was really unnerved in the house. I called my uncle and said, hey, things have happened here. I think I may have mentioned I thought that place was haunted, but I told him, I said, like, my aunt had just left. This is what's going on. And he just kind of chuckled and talked me through it and said, hey, maybe your grandmother didn't like them taking her things. Who really knows? But something else neat, when I wrote my Southern Ghost Story South Nashville book, I did find out that right across the street from where I was living, there was a storm or something, and a tree got blown over. And when the tree got blown over, there was like a skeleton tangled up in the roots, and it was a Confederate soldier. During the Battle of Nashville, Confederate General Hood stayed at Traveler's Rest. That was his headquarters. So they kind of fought and skirmished all around. It was a little bit further away from Nashville, South Nashville, going towards Brentwood, where the Battle of Nashville took place. But soldiers would have come that way, I suppose. How they got separated, or they were just looking for some water, or just trying to find somewhere quiet to die. There are rumors of a big mass grave being like, if you know how Nashville's set up, that was, there was CVS's on the corner of Harding Place, and Cracker Barrel's kind of across the street. They say there's a mass grave over there behind. There's a hotel next to Cracker Barrel, and there's a mass grave there where the hotel is built. And that's less than a quarter mile from where I used to live. So, Battle of Nashville, all that stuff happened. The Native Americans, the slavery, the plantation, the stone box graves that were dug up. But just, I don't know. It was weird living in there, and that kind of got me going in the paranormal, I guess, or kind of made me aware of it, or more aware of it. But, I've had experiences all over. I've had stuff happen in Savannah, Georgia. I've had stuff happen in Pensacola, Florida. I mean, I could talk all day just about my experiences. The weirdest, I think I mentioned this on the podcast before, in 2021, I was at Rosemont in Gallatin, Tennessee, and I went to see if the director was at the house. Well, I noticed his car wasn't parked around front, so I walked to the house, and I was going to go through the cut-through on the porch there to the back of the house to see if he had parked around back. And I looked to the right, and there's an old converted garage, which is now a reception hall. And I see a man in a fedora looking out the window. And I was like, that's just really strange. So I texted the director. I looked again, and he was gone. So I texted the director, and I said, hey, tell me I'm crazy, but I saw a man in a fedora back there in the reception hall. And he wrote back, oh, you saw Squire. Well, who in the world is Squire? Well, Squire, the house was built by Judge Josephus Congill. He was a big lawyer turned judge. He was buddies Andrew Jackson, very prominent guy in the early Democratic Party. Well, his grandson, also named Judge Gill, they called him Squire. So in the early 20th century, his wife loved to entertain that big, massive mansion there close to the river. Well, he liked to just go in his garage and tinker on his car and listen to the radio. So I guess maybe in the afterlife, that's where Squire is. He's in his garage, listening to the radio, just hanging out. I don't really know, but I know what I saw, and it was really wild that it was backed up by the director. All right, so another question I got, have I ever seen a ghost of a kid? No, I've only seen one apparition, which I mentioned at Rosemont. Experienced a lot of weird things. I guess I may have experienced a ghost of a kid. So there's a place called Cragfont, Castilian Springs, Tennessee. It's a little bit north of Gallatin, going towards like Hartsville. There's a house built, I think, in the 1780s, 1790s, Cragfont, and it's got a weird, wild history. Lots of weird stuff there. The guy who built it, James Winchester, his brother was scalped by a Native American. Like, there are Indian mounds literally right across the street from the house. Lots of weird things. The house is made of limestone. So upstairs is the children's room, and it's really weird because the roof is it's shaped like a boat turned upside down. The guy who built the house is a shipbuilder, and the roof is like a ship turned upside down. That's the roof. But anyway, I was up in the attic in the attic where the children lived years ago, and while I was up there, I was looking for ghost stories and talking to the staff members. And as I was coming down the stairs from the attic, the lady was downstairs, and I mentioned, "There's nothing up here. Let's get out of here." And as soon as I said that, I heard like a tapping sound behind me, and I looked, and she came up the stairs, and she's like, "What was that?" I said, "Well, it happened right over there," and I pointed at that wall. And as soon as I pointed and I said, "Right there," the tapping started across from me on another wall. So she kind of laughed, like, the children are up here, and maybe there's just something messing with us. But there are all kinds of, you can probably Google Cragfont ghost stories. I had another experience there. I was there one time. The house was closed, and I was out front talking to a master gardener. The state of Tennessee owns the site, and they have a group called the Master Gardeners who take care of the state-owned sites like the Hermitage, Rock Castle, Cragfont. And we were just talking, and all of a sudden I hear like a grenade go off in this, like the cellar of the house, like a boom, like a muffled boom, like a muffled explosion coming from downstairs of the house. And the master gardener, I noticed she just kept working. And I said, "Did you hear that?" And she kind of nodded and just kept working. I said, "I'll go with you if you want to go check that out." And she's like, "Oh, honey, it happens all the time." And so it really it unnerved me that you can hear a bomb go off in the cellar, and it's just, business as usual. But there are all kinds of stories at Cragfont. So I don't really know what happened that day, but I know what I heard, and it was an explosion coming from the cellar. I got another one here from William Bell. Do I believe in evil spirits? It's kind of a weird question. I kind of, doing my research, and I've done ghost hunting over the years, most of the stuff, I go to a haunted location, it's most just kind of just mischievous, silly stuff. Nothing really evil. Lights flickering, you hear footsteps. Nothing's going to hurt you. It's not like in the movies, you see The Conjuring or whatever. The ghosts don't want to hurt you. It's kind of like just, they're there. They kind of coexist. They're more active sometimes than others, and usually it's later in the evening. But, I've been to a handful of places where some weird things, some, I guess, quote unquote, evil things have happened. I say Oaklands Mansion. There's stories of, it's in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. The story goes that Dr. Maney, he owned the house, and he had several children with his wife. Well, he also fathered some children with the slaves. And when cholera came to Murfreesboro, all his children with his wife passed away, but all the children he had with the slaves, they survived. And they say that his wife, Mrs. Maney, is angry about that, and she doesn't like women in her home. Quote, I've been told by people that she pushes people on the stairs, pushes women on the stairs, not men, but women. But have I ever seen that? No, it's just kind of the story I've been told from some folks who've worked there and grew up in Murfreesboro. There's a place, Cragfont, there's stories of the old director there. He was coming, I mentioned this earlier, Cragfont, Castilian Springs. He was coming down the stairs, and a clock door opened and cut his nose. I was talking to a lady who worked in the house. She told me that there's video surveillance footage of books jumping off shelves like they're trying to hit the director there. Another story I was told by someone who worked with the county, there was a wedding being set up, and they had everything set up. It was all pretty and ready to go. And the next morning they come in, and all the lights have been busted. All the stuff they'd set up been torn down, and just something just rummaged through it and just messed it all up. There's some, I'm trying to think. I know in Brentwood, Tennessee, the old Harding Farm, it's now a restaurant. I had a bartender tell me that her friend is also a bartender, went down to the cellar to get something, like some wine or something, and she came back up and she said, "Hey, look at your neck." And she said, "What do you mean?" She said, "I looked in a mirror and she had a tic-tac-toe sign on her neck where someone had taken two fingers and scratched her up and down." And she said, "Well, I felt something burn, but when she saw herself in the mirror, she realized, hey, something has done something to me." So there are evil spirits, I guess. I don't like if you watch a ghost hunting shows, oh, there's demons here. I don't know what to call them that, but there are some mean, malevolent things out there. But typically you go to a haunted house or a house that has some activity, it's not going to be that. It's going to be mischievous. It's going to be footsteps. You might find things missing and then find them later in another location. It's typically what happens. Yeah, so that's about it for today. Man, make sure you're following me on Facebook, Instagram. Look for Southern Ghost Stories. Send me more questions. I'll probably do another Q&A here pretty soon. Also, check out the books. Pistols Red River, April 30th. It drops here just a few days. I'm really excited for that one. And check out the other books. They're all on Amazon, KDP. Southern Ghost Stories, Chattanooga, Ghost Stories, Graveyard Tales, Chicago. Yeah, but wherever you find the show, leave us a review, like, subscribe. Those are so helpful. But yeah, I'll see you guys here in a few more days. Check out the exclusive shirts from Monster City Madhouse, Gravestone, Rocktober, and Val Halloween. All that and much more at MonsterCityMadhouse.com.